Hello and welcome. Today we have the Bernina Record 730 and this looks like it's the 75th anniversary model, judging by this badge here. And before I plug this machine in, I want to just make sure that the motor brushes and the capacitors are in a good condition. So yeah, you'd want to maybe look at doing this. If you didn't know the history of the machine, maybe you picked it up at a thrift store or picked it up second hand, and even though people sell machines online as serviced, I find quite often they are just serviced in quotes, a quick oil, and quite often the motor brushes and the caps aren't checked. So if you've bought one online, I would definitely check the motor brushes. Also, if you've used your machine a lot and it's not been serviced in a long time, that would be a really good time to check those motor brushes as well. And as I say, if you don't know the history of the machine, or it's been sitting a long time and you can't remember how long it's been since it's been serviced, it'd be a good idea to check those motor brushes. So I'll show you how to remove the motor there, so we can get in and inspect the motor brushes. In fact, I think we can just about get away with just removing the cover. As always, when dealing with this sort of thing, don't go in here if you don't feel comfortable with dealing with electrical systems, and also obviously make sure you've got the power plug unplugged there at all times. We'll start by just removing these two flathead screws here. I think we'll be straight into it. Unlike if you've seen my video on the that one's tight. 800 series Berninas. The motor's probably not quite as easy to get into as this one. Yeah, that just lifts off now, so I'll just get rid of that screw. With the 800 series, you've actually got to take the side panel off here, and then remove a motor belt, and then undo the mounting screws, and you can remove the whole motor. It all comes as sort of one. The motor's kind of mounted inside a plastic cover, whereas this looks like you can literally just lift this cover away. So really nice, easy access for maintenance there. So apart from things looking a little bit dusty, things look intact. The motor belt tension seems to be okay. May do with a little bit of a tightening. So let's remove this motor here and have a wee look. And it looks like it's done by just removing these two screws here. I'll remove the motor belt here. Just flick that off. Get that out of the way. A little bit of oil dribbling out there. That's just oil in the screw hole by the look of it. Two mounting screws. We can remove the motor, but you can see there that we've still got this power. That's the cable for the light. We have a look in here. There's an end cap here. So just the two screws on the end cap there. And this should give us access to the motor brushes. Two screws. So we've got the motor brush holder in here, and if we have a close look in there, you might just be able to see the motor brush down in there, and it's difficult to tell exactly how much life that's got left in it without pulling this motor brush carrier out, I would say. It looks like there's no sort of easy access to that. Possibly we need to take this terminal here off, and that may allow us to remove this whole motor brush holder there. Although, maybe this plastic cover here comes off. It's just a little bit hard to tell straight away what the easiest way is to check those motor brushes properly. So the reason we don't want the motor brush to wear out completely is because it will damage the motor, and it could be a very expensive repair job to get these motors repaired. I have to admit I've actually done a practice run of this because it's a bit awkward. First of all, just start by removing this screw here. So this goes for both motor brushes. So what I'm doing here is just removing the housing mounting screw, and we'll just pull the terminal out of the way there in the meantime. And the trick with this is because what happens here is the motor brush, which is down in here, it would be quite nice if you could just pull this this housing straight out, like that. But the motor brush catches on a ledge here and here, and you can't, without sort of forcing things, you can't easily get that out. So what I've found is the easiest way is to partly bring the housing out just far enough to get a screwdriver in. So the motor brush, you can see, is that black piece just at the end of the screwdriver there, and that catches on a ledge, pops out because there's a spring in here pushing the motor brush out, and it catches there. So what we have to do is push that back in and then just pull it out enough to allow a screwdriver, just a fine tipped screwdriver, just to hold the motor brush in, and then you can just pull the whole lot carefully, pull the whole lot out, and just being careful not to let the spring ping the brush away. It's actually pinged into the motor there, but that's okay. So there we go, just like that. So the motor brush is designed to just wear away. You want to check the motor brushes from time to time. It depends how often you're using the machine, but you don't want this motor brush to completely wear away, and because this surface here is actually running on what's called the commutator on the motor, and it's this here is just, with the force of the spring, is being pushed up against the commutator, this surface here on the end, and gradually that just wears away and away and away. But what you don't want happening is the brush wearing right out and the spring contacting the commutator, because that will cause a major problem, and it could be very expensive to repair. So the key is to inspect these from time to time. So when it gets down sort of quite close here, you want to be replacing the brush, and they're readily available. There's no problem to do that. And the brush, when you receive the brush, you might just get the little carbon brush piece here, so you need to reuse the spring. So if you were going to do that, you would separate the two here, just pull the spring off the brush there, try not to stretch the spring too much, and then with your new brush you just push that back on, and sometimes I find just a little twist helps it go back on there, and then you can reinstall the brush back into the holder here. So reinstalling is basically the reverse. I would just hold the brush there with a screwdriver, just gently get that back into place there. Oops, now the brush has popped out. Just stop the spring from coming out with the screwdriver, and try and position this holder here, and just make sure that the brush doesn't catch anywhere And that holder should push in nice and smoothly like that, and then just bring your terminal down here and do the screw up just like so, and then basically rinse and repeat for the other side. Just going to take a look in here to see whether we've got any capacitors that need attention. It's not just 2 screws there. So the capacitors, they smooth out, well, they help smooth out the electrical waveform and stop flickering on the lamp and arcing and things like that. Just carefully. Yeah, there's a little spring type washer here. Sits in there by the look of it. That, let's make sure we don't lose that. Now that's the capacitor set there. Electrical terminals here. Speed switch. The thing with the capacitors is that it's difficult to tell when they are going to fail, but you can tell if they're imminently going to fail, if they're bulging or leaking. Just as a comparison, I've got some capacitor sets here from the 800 series, and in the 800 series we've got this capacitor set here. It's just a black box basically with 4 wires coming out of it, and that looks fine. That's how they should look. There's no damage there whatsoever, no leaking. Quite often they'll crack and leak, or if you have a look at this one, it's actually blowing the this one here has blown the sort of pink potting compound out, and we might just about be able to pull it out. No, we can't. So this one's exploded and popped out this. I might be able to get in here and maybe cut into this and take a closer look, but I'll leave that for another video. So you can see there that there's definitely something wrong with this capacitor here, this set. There's actually 4 capacitors in the set. Is it 4? 1, 2, yeah, 4 capacitors in the set. Now that's obvious that that's got a problem. As say they can split and leak, bulge, and when they fail they go with a bang and they give you a hell of a fright, puff out a whole lot of stinky smoke, and quite often the machine will run on, so the machine will run by itself even though you don't have your foot down on the foot controller, and so the only thing really to do there is to turn the power off and unplug the machine. Now you can remove the capacitors from the machine and still use it. It's okay, but it's not recommended. As far as I know, they stop arcing in the motor brush area and the foot controller. Also they stop the light from flickering. Yeah, you get a little bit of flicker on the bulb and whatnot, so it just helps smooth all that out. But you can run them without them. Wouldn't recommend it. They also interfere with AM radios and other electrical devices, so it is a good idea to get them replaced. They can be rebuilt. The capacitors are really common sort of off-the-shelf items, but they just need to be built up in a way to replicate this setup here. Now that capacitor set there is looking okay, but as I say, it's difficult to tell how much life it's got left in it. Generally, if it's not leaking or showing signs of bulging or expanding, I'd be tempted just to leave it there, but just be aware that that could fail at any time. Could be as soon as I plug the machine in, it could fail. It could be 10 years time. It's difficult to say. But some of these Bernina machines are starting to blow these capacitor sets. The Elna machines, they also, well, most sewing machines have them, but these set of capacitors like this in a sort of potted little package like this, where you've got 4 capacitors in one set here. It was quite common to see them like that in machines of this era, and the Elners also have them, the likes of the SU and whatnot, but they seem to be surviving a little bit better. It's probably a good idea to draw a little diagram of where these cables connect to, just in case you accidentally disconnect something, you don't know where the cable came from. It's quite a good idea to have a little diagram. Okay, I've taken note of where the wires go there, where what terminals the wires plug into. Just be aware there's these little isolating plates that sit in there like that. There's two of those sit in these little slots here. They just sit in there like that. The switch just sits there like that, and then you can just put the isolating plates back into their little slots there. Just take note of where they come from, and then we should be able to hopefully get enough slack here. These terminals are actually going to be quite easy to get off. They're quite a nice design, but I think I do have to take well, let's see if I can pull that terminal back to there. You can see that the terminals just clamp around the shaft there, but if I can pull the terminal up the shaft, it might just give me enough slack to get those. It's just a little bit sort of tangled down in there. It's going to be quite hard to get this out. Just get some long nose pliers in there and gently pull that cable out there. It's given us a bit more leeway there. There we go. And we can see on the capacitor set here we've got a 0.06 microfarad. That'll be the one across the bulb. And 0.02 microfarad, that's probably the one across the foot controller, and then two 2000 picofarad Y-class capacitors down to ground on the motor. It'd actually be to ground on the machine, so they need to be Y-class capacitors for electrical safety. The 0.02 and the 0.06 microfarad will be X-class capacitors across the phase and neutral. So I'd probably be tempted to leave that in there at this stage. I'll get everything back in there and tidy it up. Just slides back in there, and then just go ahead and slide these terminals back down here. Just slide those right down the shaft. Just slide them down as far as they'll go. That one's fine. Slip the switch back in there. So I haven't actually disconnected anything there, which is quite handy. We'll just get these cables tucked back in here. So that's got the little isolating plate there, and there's another one on the other side. Just slides in there like that, and then the switch sits there. Tuck these cables in here, make sure everything's in order there. We can put this cover back on here. The cover's actually got a couple of wee locating pins there as well, so just be careful with those. Don't lose those. Put the little spring back in. Spring there, and we should be able to just pop that back like that. Get the two screws in. And that switch there is your minimum and maximum speed switch. And so now that we've checked all of that, the motor can be put back in. And generally while I'm in this area, I'll have a wee clean out this area here. Gets a little bit grubby. Just like that. So then it's just a matter of putting the motor back into its position. So I just gave that a quick clean up. Normally I would spend a bit more time, getting this really clean here, especially if it was a machine that I was going to keep. Clean all this, get a little bit of cleaning product on there. I don't use anything too harsh. This is just a simple sort of multi-purpose cleaner. I've never had any problems with this cleaner being too harsh or anything, but yeah, I might need something a little bit stronger just to get this sort of, that's just dried up oil, I think, and dirt. But yeah, so you know, normally I'd work on cleaning all of that quite nicely there, but I won't go and do too much of that today. And then it's just a matter of, you know, putting the machine or the motor back together here. Just watch, I've actually got the light wires sort of a bit twisted up there, so I'll just carefully untwist those, sit the motor back in situ there. You could at this stage put the motor belt on, just slip the motor belt over. It's going to be loose on there because we don't have the mountings installed, but that's quite a good time to do it. And then we just tip the machine forward there, get our mounting screws back on there. And you can see there's a little bit of movement, so it's just a matter of just lining up the motor pulley really just to be square. That should be fine there. We'll just nip that up like that. Make sure to put the end cap back on there, the motor end cap. And then we can sit the cover back on and just tip the machine back again and get the cover mounting screws in there. And there we'll be all set to go there. You know, the motor belt may need adjusting. I'll do a separate video on motor belts and adjustment. And now I feel confident to plug this machine in and use it. So the two main reasons I wouldn't plug the machine in without knowing the history of it would obviously be if those capacitors were about to blow or had blown already. But most importantly, the motor brushes. I certainly wouldn't want to use the machine at all if those motor brushes were getting close to being worn right out. So now we're set to go, and we can confidently plug the machine in and you know, be sure that there's not going to be any major damage. So I hope you enjoyed that look at the Bernina Record 730, checking out the motor, in particular the motor brushes and the capacitors, and I thank you very much for watching.